Hello, welcome to another Looney Tunes review video. If you are new to the channel, make sure you subscribe to follow my journey to review all 1000 classic Looney Tunes shorts and give this video a like as well. So this is a review for Into Your Dance, released in 1935. It's the 105th in the series, and it's directed by Friz Freleng. There is a beautiful restoration out there that's been on streaming services. Hopefully it'll make its way on disc at some point, because the last time I did this review, this was not available, so it's nice to see a restoration as we go through the short. In case you haven't seen this one, it is under copyright. I can't show you the full cartoon here on YouTube, but in case you haven't seen it, we see a boat arrive at a dock where there is a showboat, and on this showboat we see a few performances involving the amateur hour, which we'll go through in just a moment. So first up, I'm going to go through the short itself and all of the references, and then after that you'll hear from my good friend Manny Cruz, the Toonie tenor, who will discuss the music in this short, and there's actually quite a bit here. So without further ado, let's get into it. So before I get into the short though, I figured this is the perfect short to go through what on earth showboats are, because you'll notice a few shorts from the late 20s to early 30s feature them, including everyone's favorite short, Buddy's Showboat. But anyway, just to put things into perspective, these showboats were everywhere, and the heyday was in the early 20th century, and their purpose was to spread culture and entertainment. So there was no passengers, no cargo, they would just go from port to port, putting on a show. And because a lot of these towns were fairly isolated, you could only get there via boats and maybe treks that take, a very long time. But later on, as things started opening up with roads, there really was not much need for showboats anymore, and they only exist now pretty much as novelties. But they did serve a purpose to spread culture and entertainment to isolated towns alongside riverbanks. So there you are. But let's take a look at this short, and no, you're not opening up with a colorized version of Steamboat Willie or anything like that. So we see a steamboat going down the river, and it's just going about its way, nicely timed to the music as well. And you hear the toots in time to the music, and you even see an added effect of the moon in the background, giving off a wonderful little illusion of movement. It's like it's on another layer, which is a nice little added touch there. And it even goes through a waterfall, and the smoke's still coming up, with funny noises being made as it goes through. I mean, it's silly, it's fine, but, it's not a hard joke, but it's definitely an idea that's been done before in many shorts of this type. So they end up reaching the dock, and there's a crowd of people there, and this is the same crowd of people that was in Buddy's Lost World. Now, I do have to wonder which came first. Was it this one or Buddy's Lost World? So who copied who? Because when it comes to production order, things can be a bit all over the place, but either way, it is the same shot. So we see a show being docked there, and we see a whole bunch of minstrel singers singing the title song, which is Go Into Your Dance, which, again, my good friend Manny Cruz will go through very shortly. I have to say, putting aside the fact that, yes, they're minstrels, and yes, they were even sung by a minstrel group, according to Keith Scott's Cartoon Voices book, the song itself is a nice one, and I like how we hear a really good version here, and then later on we hear a rather awful version, which is part of a joke later on. And we even see a shot that's quite similar to Buddy's Showboat, where everyone's entering in, the captain's giving the tickets, and we see a minstrel show being played out in the background, but it's not directly lifted. So we see a whole bunch of people taking their seats, and once again, some of these showboats would be rather large. You can fit like a few hundred people. Some of them would be quite small. You can fit maybe 20, 30, 40 people, something along those lines. But I think some of these crowd incidental shots have been repeated from somewhere or are going to be repeated somewhere in the future. I can't quite put my finger on it, so if you know where this shot comes from, let me know in the comments. And we hear in the background the orchestra tuning their instruments, getting ready to play. And we see Captain Benny, who must have seen quite a bit of action because he's got a peg leg. So who knows what his backstory is. But anyway, he's got a peg leg, he enters the scene, and he's voiced by Ted Pierce, who, yes, if the name sounds familiar, he becomes an important writer at the Warner Brothers studio. And he introduces the world's most popular orchestra leader. And so we see a pig enter, who looks rather different. No, he's not Porky, nor is he meant to be, of course. He's actually a parody of the American band leader and composer Paul Whiteman, and I'm sure my friend Manny Cruz will discuss a little bit about him, because he was known as the Jazz King after all, so he is definitely important in the history of jazz in certain ways. But this gag is so weird. Apparently, he's the world's most popular orchestra leader, and yet every time he enters the stage, he gets pelted by tomatoes. I feel this is referencing something because he was definitely very popular. Did start to wane a bit after this short was released, sort of in the mid 30s, but this would have been in production when he was still pretty popular. So I don't know if this was based off an appearance in a radio show or stage production or something. If you know the full context, definitely let me know. But he eventually does make his way to the conductor box with a fake beard for some weird reason. It's a weird gag. Doesn't quite work, but whatever. At least the next part is probably the best part of the short. So we hear some nice music. I believe that's the Light Cavalry Overture, and it sounds pretty good, except we get someone not playing their instrument properly, which I'm sure would irritate people like Manny Cruz, who relies on proper instrumentation in order to do his job well as a singer, but anyway. And I love that added touch of that rear view mirror of the dog playing the cello. I wonder if a lot of cello players have that somewhere. Anyway, so then off screen, the Paul Whiteman caricature, he ends up hitting someone, which I'm assuming is a setup for a gag, but maybe they should have done a shot of him actually hitting someone for the next bit to work, but anyway, that's fine. So the conductor turns the page, and we hear a more faster bit of music, and everything looks pretty interesting, although those background characters look pretty weird in some shots. But look, at least this scene here, you see the wonderful trademark Friz Freleng timing as well, and the music pretty nice. So one of the orchestra members, I'm assuming he was the person that got hit in the head before. That's why the gag doesn't quite work, because if that was the case, there should have been a shot of him actually being hit. But anyway, that aside, interesting idea. The socket goes into the conductor's pigtails, and the pig just starts conducting faster, which somehow makes everything sound like a sped up audio tape. But anyway, we just go with it. Love the timing and animation of this, and the fact that Freleng does this so well. And we hear a speedy version of the William Tell Overture, and we see the tortoise playing really fast at xylophone with some amazing animation, still to the time. And we even see the violinist play so fast. I mean, is that what happens when it comes to orchestration? As soon as the conductor waves the baton really, really fast, does everyone just play absurdly fast just like this? Well, I doubt it, of course. But anyway, this is a very amusing scene. I gotta say, most 1935 shorts are pretty dull, but you get your bright spots like this, and that's why a lot of them are at least worth watching once, so you can see scenes like this. So the other orchestra members, they're sick and tired of this, and they end up knocking out the conductor, and it's like, enough, we're done. And the audience cheers. Are they cheering because he's popular because he does really fast music, or are they cheering because he's finally going away? I don't know, but anyway, that scene is all done. So the captain walks back on, and he does his Ted Lewis impression, saying, "It's only the beginning, folks, only the beginning." And that was Ted Lewis's trademark saying, and he was an American band leader as well. So he announces Amateur Night, and that appears to be a parody of the radio show, the original Amateur Hour, and it was basically a talent show that was, well, as the name suggests, looking out for new talent, because amateurs are people that do things for fun and they don't get paid, and this would help them become professionals, right? And we still see this sort of thing today with shows like The X Factor and other shows that I've absolutely no interest in watching, if I'm being honest, but in any case, it's the same thing. So the curtains rise, the amateur night's about to begin, and we first see a cow. Don't know if it's the same cow from I Haven't Got a Hat that she's trying to get out of a teaching career, but we'll go with it. Although it's voiced by the same person, Elvia Ullman, so she does this wonderful singing, and I wonder if she was actually a good singer but told to sing badly, because it's always interesting when that happens, but it's really tough to listen to her singing, and I really don't blame the captain here at all for ringing the bell saying, "Nope, you're out." And the animation there of the cow being yanked off of the stage is fantastic and beautifully timed. So the next act is a tough-looking guy, and yeah, as bad as the minstrel part of it is, this one's also something that hasn't aged quite well. It's typically, hey, let's make this guy feminine and make fun of him for it. But it's product of his time, it is what it is, okay? Now, Ted Pierce, he does the voice of this so-called tough guy doing a very effeminate voice. I guess the gag here is that he's reciting a poem. I have no idea what it is. If you know the poem, let me know in the comments. but every time he would recite a line, a sound effect is supposed to be played relating to what he's saying. So he'll say, "Now it is spring," and we hear a snowstorm, and this little birdie has now started to fly, and you hear a plane noise.
Hark, hark, a little birdie has begun to sing. The north wind has ceased, for now it is spring. Oh, look, the little birdie has started to fly.
So, of course, he's bombing, and we get a different variation on the bell being rung that, okay, this guy's clearly some sort of a boxer, so he thinks he's in a boxing arena, and we then get a novelty boxing glove, punching him out, and that's all done. Not a particularly great gag, but it's just okay. It's just fine. It is what it is. What's arguably worst is the next section, and not just in the fact that it's a genuinely bad act, where the captain would have rung the bell had he actually had the bell, but this contestant has the bright idea. It's like, okay, I'm going to take this bell with me so I can't get struck out. You know, good idea. So the voice here is by Joe Doherty, and that's the voice of Porky Pig, who had made his debut a few shorts ago in I Haven't Got a Hat. And here it sounds different than the sped up version that you would hear when he did the Porky voice. He had a natural stutter, so that makes this scene kind of hard to listen to because it feels like they're making fun of his disability. And I get it, the idea was that he's so bad, so straining, but because he took the bell, no one can sort of stop him. But yeah, it is hard to listen, it's not particularly funny, and I don't know, you just sort of shrug at it.
If you may sing it, a sad and blue song, go into your dance.
But at least here you can look at the background characters, which once again look really, really weird. So the dog finally finishes the song, which is his own rendition, I guess, of Into Your Dance. But he then realizes, hey, the audience has left, the captain is not happy because he wants the audience to stick around, because that's obviously how he makes a living, right? So yeah, the captain grabs a paddle, chases after the dog, and hits the dog's bottom in time, which then rings the bell, and we end right there. So not really much of an ending. Right, so that's the cartoon cupboard. So my good friend Manny Cruz, the Toonie Tenor, is now going to look at the music in this short and any references that I may have missed. So take it away, Manny.
Hi, everyone. This is Manny Cruz, the Toonie Tenor, coming at you with the latest edition of It's Time for Manny's Music Time with music trivia for you today. Bump! For the 1935 merry melody Into Your Dance, directed by Isidore Friz Freleng, and musical direction by Norman Spencer. So it's good to be recording one of these again. My voice was feeling a little weird the past few days, so I was trying to take it easy in terms of talking, but good for me that I took that time off to recover, and here to talk about some tunes, shall we? So let's get right into it with the tunes themselves. So there's not a lot of cues in this particular cartoon, but talk briefly about them and then some other little musical tidbits because this is a very music-heavy short. So for starters, we have the title track, which is called Go Into Your Dance, and you hear that particular phrase, go into your dance, several times in the cartoon. It's sung by the minstrel group that's in the beginning of the cartoon when the crowd is entering the showboat, an unfortunate remnant of the time period with the minstrel group, but it is what it is, singing the title track.
Blue song, go into your dance until you learn how to sing a new song. Go into your dance. Don't be complaining. Learn how to smile, and if it's raining, dance in the rain a while. Put off your sorrow until tomorrow. Go into your dance.
You hear little bits and pieces throughout the cartoon. You also hear the dog that's voiced by Porky Pig's voice actor at the time, Joe Doherty, singing the title track as well. Now, the title track itself was written by my buddies Harry Warren and Al Dubin, once again, the Lennon and McCartney of the Warner Brothers world. If you want to learn more about Harry Warren, I would suggest you listen to the audio commentary I did a while back for a great big bunch of you. And if you want to go more into detail about Al Dubin, his frequent lyricist and songwriter, please listen to the commentary for The Girl at the Ironing Board if you want to know more information about Al Dubin himself. So jumping back into Go Into Your Dance. It originally comes from a 1935 Warner Brothers feature called Go Into Your Dance that co-starred Al Jolson and Ruby Keeler. In the original film, Al Jolson is the guy that's singing. So now we move towards, after introducing the song, the showboat arrives, the crowd is coming in, everybody's excited. You see the orchestra tuning, and then you have the MC coming out. I believe, was it Captain Benny, if I'm not mistaken, from the banner that I saw earlier in the cartoon, and he's voiced here by Ted Pierce. So then you get Porky Pig. No, that is not Porky Pig. That's a Porky's, I don't know, distant cousin who happens to be an orchestral conductor. And speaking of which, conductor, the pig himself is a caricature of the very famous American band leader, Paul Whiteman. So a little bit about Paul Whiteman, because he does have some connections to animation history. So I'm taking this information from the Britannica Online Encyclopedia, and I quote, Paul Whiteman, born March 28, 1890 in Denver, Colorado, and he died December 29, 1967 in Doylestown, Pennsylvania, was an American band leader called the King of Jazz for popularizing a musical style that helped to introduce jazz to mainstream audiences during the 1920s and 30s, unquote. So Paul Whiteman, he was a big deal at this time period. A lot of audiences would have seen him and would have been familiar with the caricature. He was the person that commissioned the very great American composer George Gershwin to compose Rhapsody in Blue. You're probably familiar with that melody. It's one of the most famous pieces of American orchestral music ever composed. It was from 1924. Yes. And actually, Whiteman conducted the premiere of Rhapsody in Blue in New York City at that year. And that song starts off with a very famous, difficult clarinet solo where the clarinet does a trill. It goes, it's like we're fluttering between two different notes. And then the clarinet has to bend upwards to the high note. And if you are doing an instrument like a violin or a cello, a string instrument, bending isn't that much of a problem. Or like doing, in music, we call that a glissando. Or think of like when Yosemite Sam falls, and you hear the piano go, that's called the glissando. Actually, no, for a violin or a trombone, it would be more of a portamento, as well as for singers, doing a slide, okay? And that is not easy to do on a clarinet. So it is definitely a test of ability to pull that off when you're doing the bend for the beginning of the song. George Gershwin was the one that played the piano for the premiere of Rhapsody in Blue. Paul Whiteman commissioned Gershwin to write it. And actually, before I forget, I'm recording this on September 22nd. George Gershwin's birthday is later this week. A happy early birthday, George Gershwin, born September 26, 1898. He died very young, too. He was only 38 when he passed away. He died in July of 1937. But anyway, going to Paul Whiteman, like I said, he was very popular at this time period. He helped make jazz very well known in the mainstream. He did hire mainly white players. Most people know jazz is a black form of music, and pretty much all, as I always tell people, most of the music that we enjoy, the popular music of the United States, jazz, rock and roll, the blues, hip hop, so on and so forth. It all comes originally from black musicians. But I'm guessing, considering the constraints of the era, he hired white musicians, and he also kind of kept it simple as opposed to other jazz groups where they really let loose in terms of improvisation. And like I said, Paul Whiteman does have a connection to animation because an actual caricature of him was featured in the 1930 film called The King of Jazz. Why don't you look at that? Now, this wasn't a Warner Brothers thing. This was through Universal. And in the film, Paul Whiteman, Universal, this is where Tex Avery was working prior to coming to Warner Brothers. He's in a scene in the film, like I said, in the film The King of Jazz, with a lion playing the violin. It's been a while since I've seen it. I mean, I could watch it right now while I'm doing a commentary, but I don't want to do that. But yeah, he's running after a lion and all this other stuff. Like I said, it's been a while since I've seen it, but I apologize if I don't have all the deets in front of me before all the cartoon nerds come at me. And this was actually one of the first and possibly the first use of two-strip Technicolor in animation. Don't quote me on it. Like I said, I know some nerd is going to scream at me in the comments. Please save yourself and save me. So anyway, let's get back to the cartoon itself. So you have, let's just call him Paul. So Paul the pig, Paul Pig, Paulie Pig. Anyway, comes out. I enjoy that he starts getting pelted with tomatoes the second he comes out. This is definitely a harsh crowd to come out to. So Paul Pig comes out, he gets ready to conduct, and he starts off doing the Light Cavalry Overture by Franz von Suppe. And if you want to know more about the Light Cavalry Overture, which is used a lot in animation, I would highly recommend listening to the commentary that I did a while back for Shake Your Powder Puff from 1934, where I go into detail about the Light Cavalry Overture, as well as a little information about the composer himself, and also another piece of music that Suppe, because there's an accent on the P, on the E at the end, so Suppe, my mistake. But anyway, the Light Cavalry Overture, I always think of the Disney cartoon Symphony Hour, which features that piece of music. As well as the Poet and the Peasant Overture, which was used by Warner's, was used by Paramount, was used by Universal, so on and so forth. So listen to Shake Your Powder Puff for more information about that. And then it goes into the very famous ending of the overture to William Tell by Gioacchino Rossini. So, bum, 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 bum. And what I love about this scene is just like the little gags in, when he's conducting the orchestra and you hear two wrong notes. I believe it sounds like a trombone playing the wrong note. You just see Paul give that death glare to one of the brass players. And working in music, if I'm singing in a choir or if I hear like a member of the orchestra or a band play a wrong note, I know exactly the feeling that pig. I'm actually looking at like that scowl he's doing, looking at one of the members. Or I like how in the middle of it, he takes out the hammer and he whacks one of the members of the orchestra in time. I like how the dog has like a little rear view mirror while he's playing, looks like he's playing the bass. And I sing here and there as I sing at different churches for different services. And my friends who are organ players, usually they're seated away from the congregation when they're playing. And I've seen stuff like that where they have like a mirror, like a rear view mirror on the organ itself so they could see what's going on in the service. And it reminded me of that, but, with a bass player in this cartoon. And then, of course, going back to the William Tell Overture, you have one of the members of the orchestra playing a prank on Il Maestro. And Il Maestro Porco, I think that's how you say the pig maestro anyway. And then he starts conducting really fast the William Tell Overture. I always get a kick out of the turtle trying to keep up, playing the xylophone part to it. I mean, a part of me is like, can somebody play that fast? But I was like, wait a minute, the recording sped up. And I know that our buddy Blue Genocide, if you're listening, hi Blue, I don't know, but when he starts getting shocked and his glasses, the way it's animated, I'm getting vibes of Dr. Robotnik, or for the younger people, whatever, Dr. Eggman from the Sonic franchise. Like, it looks like Dr. Robotnik conducting the orchestra when he's being electrocuted. And I have experiences being a conductor myself, a choral conductor, and fortunately I've never been electrocuted in the process. Not yet, at least. So, the last cue that we have in this cartoon before, recycling the title one, comes from an opera called Denora. And it's the scene where you have the cow when they start doing amateur hour. And the cow starts singing a little bit of an opera excerpt. And what she's singing, like I said, comes from the opera Denora. It's an aria from the opera called, I don't know, my French is terrible, but the translation for that is, I'm pretty sure in English, new language, English, not English. Man, I am kind of rusty in these commentaries. So I believe it's Light Shadow, Ombrelegere. So it's Light Shadow. I was correct. That's the aria she's singing.
The shadow lay a reading on my back.
So the composer himself was German, but yet the operas that he wrote were influenced by Italian opera. I mean, opera comes from Italy, but it was more of the Italian style in his compositions. And the libretto, the words of the opera were in French. So the cow, I believe, is singing the French version, the French libretto, but her diction is very unclear. Like, I am having a hard time. It's not just that, I don't understand French that well. I mean, I've sung in French in the past, but yeah, I could see why she was booed off. Maybe the people in the audience were big opera critics. A little bit about the composer himself for the opera excerpt. I'm not going to go too much into detail because the scene's so small, but Giacomo Meyerbeer, that's his name that he would use down later on in his career because he was originally born Jakob Liebman Meyerbeer. He was born September of 1791, died May of 1864. He was a big deal in opera during that time period. Apparently, he was the biggest composer of that time period, and he was the link between the music of Mozart. I think he was born the same year Mozart died, 1791, and he also existed during the period when Richard Wagner started coming into prominence. And speaking of Wagner, a lot of Warner Brothers cartoons have parodied his operas. What's Opera Doc? You hear bits of it in Hair Meets Hair and other cartoons. But yet Wagner, and this is a well-documented point in music history, but Wagner was very anti-Semitic, and Giacomo Meyerbeer was Jewish, and Wagner openly campaigned against Meyerbeer and against his music and his career, and Meyerbeer fell out of prominence, later in life, and it even got to a point where years after he died, but his music was not performed, especially during the rise of Nazism and all the anti-Semitism associated with that period of time. But over the years, Meyerbeer's music has been resurrected, and fortunately, because I haven't heard too much about his music. I knew a little bit about him, but there's some great stuff. Like I said, he was a German composer, but wrote more in an Italian style, and he used, libretti in different languages and whatnot. And it's a shame that his music fell victim to just bigotry and hatred. And at the same time, as much as this is something that a lot of musicians and opera singers deal with, the whole issue of Wagner being such a huge figure in musical history, but at the same time, he was despicable in his anti-Semitism. And sadly, his legacy is tainted to an extent. But that's an even longer discussion that I would probably have another time. But anywho, going back to the cartoon itself, to go to the scene of looks like the boxer, big tough guy reciting poetry, which I always get a kick out of. And then it goes into the scene near the end with the Joe Doherty dog doing his routine. He's singing the title track, and then he tries to swindle Captain Benny out of, giving him the old ding. So those are pretty much the information for the cues. To wrap this one up, I hadn't seen it in a while, and the last time I saw it was when it was not restored, but now it's restored. It was restored on HBO Max, and hopefully this one will be on either new Looney Tunes Collector's Choice Volume 4 or later editions. I have the other 3 volumes, and I'm super happy with it, and I'm hoping the more the merrier. But yeah, the cartoon itself, especially in the scene with Paul conducting and being shocked by electricity, and the musical timing is starting to get sharper and sharper. So I was definitely chuckling at a few parts of this cartoon. The trombone thing, Paul hitting one of the members of the orchestra with a hammer. Like, you could tell Friz is getting sharper, and he's starting to become more of the Friz that we all know and love. So yeah, these are my thoughts for Into Your Dance. I'm not going to dance, or maybe I should do a safety dance. See what I did there? Because if I'm not mistaken, Safety Dance, are they from Australia? Or am I thinking of Men at Safety Dance? What's the name of the group? Oh, they're Canadian, Men Without Hats. I'm thinking Men at Work. Those are Who Can It Be Now? So Men Without Hats is Canadian. Men at Work is Australian. Safety Dance is a song from the 80s. I mean, some of the listeners, I'm assuming, are Canadian. And Blue is Canadian. So there you go. Nice segue. Close enough. All right. Thanks for listening, everyone. It's always a pleasure to come on to talk about these shorts. Please follow me on social media at the Toonie Tenor, THE. THE, there you go. TOONEYTENOR for more updates on my life as a musician, as well as a multifaceted geek. Some days I talk Simpsons or Ninja Turtles or Ghostbusters, or Looney Tunes and Merry Melodies, of course. And speaking of which, I was just on a little plug to my buddy Jonathan Graves from the This Means podcast. I just appeared on his newest episode, so if you want to hear more of your beloved Toonie Tenor, you can, where we talk about Looney Tunes, we talk about the new Beetlejuice film, and I know that this cartoon is very related to Beetlejuice in some way. I don't know. I'll find a connection. Give me a few minutes. But anywho, thanks for listening again, folks. It's always a pleasure. Keep supporting Anthony and his amazing work, and I'll talk to you soon. And like I said, keep dancing, keep going into it. And no, never mind. I'm not coming up with anything clever. It's too late. All right, folks. Have a good day, night, whatever. And that's all, folks.
That's all, folks.
Thank you, Manny. And as an added bonus, my good friend SC MacPeter has just got a few things to say about this short as well. So take it away, SC.
Hello, this is SC talking about one of my favorite early Friz Freleng cartoons, Into Your Dance, which is named after the song in this cartoon, which is named after the movie, and then named after the book, Go Into Your Dance, which was adapted in 1935 as a big Al Jolson hit for Warner's, I believe, or Warner's under First National. I feel like in terms of Friz Freleng of this period, he was really getting into casting the animators. I can't necessarily tell you everyone besides Cal Dalton, Ben Klopsich with the credit animators, but I can detect two other animators. One is Roland Hamilton, and the other is Don Williams. I'll get into what some of their scenes are in just a moment, but one thing that gets me interested is just that this cartoon focuses a lot more on gags than some of the other cartoons of this period. I guess it adapted itself to be more of a gag cartoon because halfway through, the captain announces that it's going to be an amateur night, which is based on the Major Bowles amateur night. In the opening, sadly, those minstrel characters doing the Go Into Your Dance song sequence, which is animated by Ham Hamilton, who goes back to being Disney's first employee. He had a very crude look to his animation, but it looks like over time they would get more assistants to clean up his work. So when you see them doing the whole tap dance, it looks like someone was actually really cleaning up or possibly even taking it over. Someone may have shared that scene with Ham Hamilton, but I think it's a nice rendition of the song at the beginning. And then we get into the whole big sequence with the Paul Whiteman pig doing the orchestra. And then it speeds up, which I believe was recorded by actually playing the film faster, from what I remember. But it shows that Friz Freleng was trying to experiment with sound and trying to do new things, which I think was more advanced than what most people were doing this period. Because I tend to think of 1934 to about Snow White as being a bit of a bad time for cartoons after the Code. Except for Disney and Fleischer, and even then I couldn't call all of them greats. Or I think Freleng was doing some exceptional, interesting ideas for this period before Tex Avery came along and really revolutionized how the Warner Studio thought in terms of making its cartoons about gags. But this here shows that Freleng did have the potential to do great gag ideas on his own. He's doing this great setup orchestra with all of them getting exhausted and playing it fast. And we see Don Williams really getting some great work to do, like he does the whole scene of the pig when he uses the hammer to ring the gong as the orchestra leader. And then we see him doing that great xylophone scene where he's using a bit of early smearing, some really sort of anticipate the dry brush that he would use when he went back to Warner's later in the 40s. Take a look for that and also all the sweat. But he had a very looser style this period. He wasn't drawing like he did later on. He was drawing closer to Bill Nolan, which makes sense because he came from the Land Studio working on those Oswald cartoons. And then we move on to the Amateur Night, which it's just a way to get more gags. And of course, we see the cow, the miscut design. I guess this was in production around the time of I Haven't Got a Hat. And then Freleng was following up on that. So we have that scene. And then we get to one of my favorite parts of the cartoon, the whole gangster cat doing a bit of a pansy recital of a spring poem. This is by Ham Hamilton, which this does not look like he got much assistant work on it. It really looks old and crude. But it has great acting, which is why he was kept around and why Hugh Harman remembered him as his favorite animator, because he could always get the good acting in with that he wanted, even if the drawing was crude. And I can really appreciate that, because again, you get that great little acting. You have him moving his head around. You have him flapping his wings when he talks about the birds flying before you hear the comical jet sound. And then it cuts to Don Williams when he's starting to throw the punches around. Just nice. And then we get the return of Joe Doherty, using his natural voice and singing Go Into Your Dance, but stuttering. Like I've been doing, that's been cut out. Gosh, audience, it's got me. But we get that. We get him foiling the captain of the showboat because he takes away the gong, and then his singing so bad that it actually gets rid of the entire audience. I guess the Showboat wasn't going down the stream at this time, but afterwards we get to the end of the cartoon where Don Williams takes over with that whole business of the hammer and hitting his rear end that has the gong of the foil, which I think is quite funny. And it's a bit of obvious humor, but at the very least, it's trying something new, doing the whole stutter routine. I don't think anyone was using stutters. It ate up so much film, I'm sure. No wonder they had to speed up Porky's voice. It saved them film. And again, Mel would make it a lot easier because then they didn't have to rely on someone who was unreliable. But I really don't want to go into like the whole restoration tads because most of these do look very good. But just knowing from what I do about two-color Technicolor from this period is that it was processed on a red-green, whereas Cinecolor is red-blue. This cartoon looks a little too blue for me to really look at it as just being a two-color Technicolor cartoon. And I think the reason is that they may have done it this way, and Mr. and Mrs. is the name, which suffers from the same issue, is because of all the water that made them want to do it a lot more blue, neutral, when it really should be green. And I can see it from earlier prints, like physical prints of the cartoon, rather than just doing the scan and messing with the colors. It does look nice, I will say, but again, that's not how it looked in 1935, or even in TV prints before those prints faded. But enough of that. I felt this cartoon was really good, and I really want to talk about it a little bit because I think it's one of Freleng's earliest greats in a time where most cartoons besides Disney and Fleisch's were quite dull and forgettable, and even the rest of Warner's for that matter. Freleng was really the guy who was holding them up from the ground during this period. And I really do think Freleng deserves more credit than he does for jumping onto the gag style. It took him a little bit. I mean, most of 36 was him just gradually leaning towards doing his own style of Hollywood parodies and doing funnier gags in them. But he got it, and he could do it, shown by this cartoon. But I think I've said enough. I don't want to stutter more. Good night, everyone. Have a great show up on this Showboat.
Look, this one's a little bit frustrating. It has a bit that I genuinely love, which is the whole orchestra bit, and I would have loved if the whole short was like that. But the amateur hour stuff, the cow bit was fine. The other two bits, not as much. But look, it's watchable, and I'm glad it's restored. Look, this one gets 7 out of 10, and most of that 7 really is from the wonderful orchestra bit and how well timed it is to the music and how funny it actually is, even if some of the gags weren't quite set up properly. But that'll do it for this one. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and until next time, take care.